We tried it. We cooked up some bear tenderloin, and man, like when I say it changed my life for sure.
All right, Brett. It's been a crazy day.
Yeah.
Thanks for jumping on here. This podcast, I know we'd already had you on, actually not too long ago, but I wanted to do this one because it's kind of a topic that drives me crazy a little bit, and I'm sure it drives you, being that you're a bear fanatic, crazy as well.
Right.
I keep seeing people and hearing people talk about how the fact that, like, don't eat bear, you'll get sick from bear. And I actually thought you'd be the perfect one to talk about bear meat and how to cook it and is it safe to eat. And it's interesting to me that, like, we keep hearing about this and it keeps coming up because every bear that we've ever harvested, we did some roasts and some of that, but honestly, for the most part, we just make sausage out of it and we make breakfast sausage and all that. But let's talk about, like, first of all, is bear meat safe to eat?
Yes and no. And I say that because if you cook it to the proper temperature, then yeah, it's safe to eat. I mean, I've been eating bear since my first one in 2020. I've never ever felt sick or been sick from it. But also, no, because if you don't cook it properly, then they have trichinella, the parasite, and the effect of trichinella is called trichinosis, which is another thing that people often get confused. But
you just taught me something.
Yeah, so the parasite itself is called trichinella. Trichinosis is what you get from the parasite, and it's a parasite that's encased in like a shell, and it embeds into the muscle grains. So when you eat bear meat, your stomach acid actually melts that encasing, and then it releases the parasite, and it takes like 3 weeks for your symptoms to show up.
Really?
And and so 3 weeks later, you'll have like diarrhea and like really sore like muscle pains and stuff like that. You just feel sick. So a lot of people don't even know that they have it.
So what other kind of meat would they say just to make sure you cook it well before you eat it?
What other kinds of meat?
Yeah.
Like mountain lion is another one. Pork.
How about chicken?
Chicken. That's right.
Pork.
Right.
So that's kind of my response always when people say, like, oh, you shouldn't eat bear, or you have to but yeah, you could eat bear, but you got to really make sure you cook it. Well,
right.
Who eats raw chicken?
Right.
Who orders their chicken at a restaurant? Rare.
Right.
Yeah. Who orders their pork? Rare.
Exactly.
Right. So in my mind, it's not a lot different. I just think it freaks people out that there is potentially this parasite in bear. But, I actually found, something that happened to me when I harvested a moose in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
The butcher called me and he was like, "Hey, you got all these little worms like in your meat."
Oh man.
And I was like, "Oh no, that's like," I mean, we took care of it. It was cold out. Like everything about it was fine. And so I called a biologist up in northern Alberta, got talking about it. And it was, when I say worms, like, we're not talking giant, freaking maggots, right?
Yeah.
Basically you couldn't see them unless you looked really, really, really close.
Yeah.
And I actually wish, maybe you can Google, Henry, like worms and bear meat, or maybe even parasites and not bear meat, I'm sorry, moose meat, or worms and moose meat. I don't remember what it was. I should have come more prepared for this podcast. But basically, a ton of the moose up there have this worm. But basically, when you cook the meat, it just goes away. And also, it's so small that no one really notices it. But when you cook it, it kills that worm. And it's also not a worm that's like, you're not going to get sick from it.
Right.
So the point is it's bear meat is not the only kind of meat that you can potentially get sick from, or that potentially just has other things in it. Right. It's just gotten this reputation, which, again, it's gotten a reputation that it deserves, but also mule deer.
Yeah.
Right? You kill chronic wasting disease, right?
Right.
And they're testing meat. That's a lot of the game stations. They really want you as a hunter coming through. One, they want to know the harvest numbers and how the deer populations are doing health-wise. but they also want to test these animals to find out where trichinosis is.
Right.
Buffalo have brucellosis. Right?
Yeah.
So
Which
there's
is a lung disease, isn't it?
I think so. And so the point of all this, right now, actually, I just heard a report this morning that there's potentially a big epidemic happening this year. It's going to be maybe pretty bad, and it may affect the turkey and the chicken market, which is bird flu.
Right.
Bird flu, they found it started out down in right near Antarctica, and it's actually damaging right now the penguin population down there. But now they're seeing it spread, and they're actually just had to euthanize, was it like 100 or 50,000 or something turkeys in like Ohio.
Damn.
So, I'm getting a little off here, but I'm not. The point is there's all kinds of potential diseases, potential things you can find in meat, potential things that could go wrong if you don't cook your meat.
Right.
Across the spectrum.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, one that, a lot of people miss is, seafood, for instance. And a good example of that is, last time I was on here, we talked about commercial fishing. And so I was commercial fishing for cod. And man, after seeing so many cod, like I really have no desire to eat it, but also, so many parasites in cod. I've never seen anything like it. And folks don't realize that, but they eat it, it's all in their gills, like we don't fillet them right there on the boat, but same thing at the processing stations, there's worms all over them inside. And it's like that for a lot of fish too. They're wild. They're wild animals.
I'd venture to say I already know this is the fact. You don't want to go visit a huge, pork slaughtering plant either and see how your hot dogs are made.
No, not at all.
So with that, we all understand now that there's some inherent risk at different kinds of meat, more risk in some than others. You actually hear people say like, oh, I got sick, and it's like, oh, what happened? You get food poisoning. It's like, yeah, I think I got some bad fish. And we just accept it, but nobody says, hey, don't eat fish, right? Or don't eat seafood.
Right.
You just understand that maybe you were at a restaurant that didn't refrigerate it good enough. It sat out too long. And that can happen really quickly. So if we acknowledge that bear meat, much like other meats, needs to be cooked to the right temperature,
right?
Let's actually talk about that, about how do you like to prepare your bear meat? And actually, let's first go into the facts of like what temperature does trichinosis actually die at?
So according to the USDA, and this is something that my brother actually told me, he has a background in food service, and he brought it to my attention one day that, trichinella is killed at 144 degrees. And I was like, no, it's not. It's 160, because that's what you always hear from folks. And he's like, no. And he sent me the data straight from the government website. So the USDA, I don't remember what year it was. I think it was 2018, put out a report under the Food Safety Inspection Service, something like that. And they put out a chart for temperatures that trichinella is killed at. So 144 is instantly. But what they did also find is that if you do it at 140, it takes 2 minutes. Mm-hmm. You do it at 135, it takes 7 minutes, or whatever those numbers are. I don't have them exact.
I think actually down into the 120s. I think at like 125, but it takes like 21 hours.
Right.
So the point is like you're putting exposure, same as a human, right? Like you can withstand so much temperature,
right?
But how much temperature for how long?
Exactly.
So
exactly.
So in that, would you say 140 range?
144 is instantly.
Okay.
Yeah. And so whenever I'm cooking my bear, so to continue that story, my brother called me and he's like, well, you want to try it? He was like, we could put it in the sous vide machine, and then that way we know exactly what temperature it's at. Because the deal is that every square inch of that meat has to hit that temperature. And I was like, I'll try it. Mm-hmm. It would be a game changer to not have to eat bear well done. Because nobody wants to eat steak well done anyway. I wouldn't eat a ribeye well done.
Right.
And so We tried it. We cooked up some bear tenderloin, and man, like when I say it changed my life, it changed my life for sure. I mean,
Really?
because you can, especially hunting fall bears like I do, eating a lot of berries through late July, August, September, choke cherries, huckleberries, blueberries, depends on where the bears are at. So the meat has like a slightly sweet taste to it. And so if you're not cooking it well done and cooking all the flavor out of it, you actually get to taste that a little bit better,
Much like beef. I mean, that's why
Right.
I like eating a medium rare steak, right?
Right.
You're getting those flavors
Exactly.
versus a well done piece of meat where a lot of the juices have evaporated, flowed out of that, cooked out,
Right.
eating shoe leather.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and just like us, I mean, animals are what they eat. Bears, if you shoot a bear that's been living up in the mountains its whole life, then it's going to taste like what it's been eating, And here for the lower 48, they're not really eating fish and stuff like that like they are up in Alaska.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a second before you continue on with where you're going with the black bears.
Yeah.
This is more of a black bear discussion, and I don't know that you or I are necessarily experts on brown bears, but
No.
but I do know, I've talked to Cole Kramer about this. I mean, people eat those brown bears as well.
Right.
But to your point with their diet, a lot of those brown bears, they have food available to them year round, right?
Mhm.
So that's why they're not really hibernating. They might slow down a bit. They might get a
Right.
little less active, but they're not going in a hole in the ground and just going to sleep all winter.
Right.
But those bears are eating a ton of like washed up dead shit on the beach.
Yeah.
Like you see the pictures of them catching salmon, and for sure that's a huge part of their diet for several months in the summer and fall.
Right.
But that's still only just 2 or 3 months out of an entire year, where a lot of times, like Cole said, they'll find a freaking whale washed up on the beach,
Right.
a walrus, sea lion, whatever,
Yeah.
and they will roll in them. They'll eat on them, and I mean, think about how big of a whale is. I mean, they'll eat on those things for
Yeah.
a couple weeks.
Exactly. As it's rotting.
And if all that they're really consisting of is fish of some form, dead, rotten, or fresh, that meat's definitely going to have a different taste than something that's eating berries or eating deer.
Right.
More of a red meat diet. And frankly, let's face it, our bears here are mostly vegetarians.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, in the spring, they'll get after deer, fawns, elk calves, and stuff. I mean, but for the rest of the year, they're opportunists, I mean, if they happen to catch a fawn that is running around without any problem, it's a pretty big if later in the year, but yeah, I mean, they pretty much are vegetarians, or they're eating gut piles from people's deer.
Yeah, come midsummer, it's going to be pretty tough for a black bear to catch a full-grown deer or an elk unless it's, again, one of the sick and the old.
Right.
So their diet definitely goes. I mean, when you bear hunt in the spring, what are you looking for?
Grass.
Green grass.
Mm-hmm.
Green grass, right? So there you go. Those bears are grazing like crazy in all spring until those calves hit, until those fawns hit.
Right. Which is why predator calling so effective in the spring.
And then once those calves start getting bigger and they're kind of starting to become pretty capable, what hits in the mountains that we all love?
Yeah, huckleberries.
Huckleberries,
yeah,
baby.
Yeah, no kidding, man, no kidding.
So that kind of leads into, I think, where you were headed with what you were talking about with what these bears eat.
Yeah. I mean, and bears they're just like any other animal, but bears especially are food driven. I mean, that's pretty much all they do is eat. And so yeah, those huckleberries hit, or like kind of like that midsummer, like the choke cherries hit. Western Washington, for instance, you got a lot of blackberries.
Yeah, we get wild raspberries and strawberries.
Right. And, so they start switching their food, but all these things are just loaded with sugar, and they're eating them so they can fatten up for the winter. So whenever you shoot a fall bear, like, you skin it and you get 3 inches of fat on there. And you got to think, like, if you are what you eat and all they've been eating is berries, it's, it's like a whitetail that's been living up in the mountains its whole life. which one's going to taste better, that one or the one that's been living down in the farmer's field eating alfalfa.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, or like our steers. I mean, a grass-fed versus a corn-fed. I mean, makes a big difference in the makeup of that meat for sure.
Right.
And their fat.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, me and my brother, we cooked up this fall bear. It was tenderloins, you know, because we wanted to give it the best chance that we could, you know, to not be like turned off by it, you know, and like tenderloin, it doesn't get much better, you know, backstrap being a close second. And so we cooked it up and you could taste the sweetness, and it has this real, when people ask me a lot what it tastes like, and I always tell them it's like a sweet beef, but in reality, it really is like its own thing. It still has like this flavor that I can't quite describe, but I love it, man. And the great thing about sous vide too is, you know, for those that are
what is
listening,
sous vide?
Yeah. So for those that don't know, it's precision. It's like a precision water bath that you can cook food in. And so you have like this tub and it's insulated, and then you have this machine that circulates water, and it brings it up to a certain temperature, and then it circulates it, but it keeps it at that temperature, so it doesn't let it go. I mean, it might fluctuate 0.1 or 0.2 degrees, but it doesn't stray from that at all.
It's like a Traeger with water.
Pretty much, yeah. And so you vacuum seal your piece of meat, you put it in there, and so for bears, you know, to be safe, I put mine in for 147. Something like that, because usually like the internal temperature will still be around like 145, give or take. So, you know, and then whenever I take it out, I make sure to temp it with a thermometer, probably 6 different spots. I mean, you know, if a piece of backstrap is, you know, like that, so, you know, some kind of shape like that, just kind of temp it in a couple different spots. And then you take it out, season it, or in some cases re-season it. Technically you're supposed to season before you put it into the sous vide, and so that it kind of soaks into the meat, you know. But
yeah, like a marinade.
But a lot of times I'm just taking mine out of the freezer because I'm on the go. And so, you know, so I'll take it out, temp it if it's at temp, kind of pat it dry, season it, sear it. And that's it. And the cool thing about sous vide is that because it's vacuum sealed and it doesn't ever get over that temperature, for one, your cooked layer when you sear it, like if you take a steak and you cook it on the grill and you cut into it, you might have that medium rare on the inside, but you'll notice as it goes towards the outside, it gets more gray.
Right.
So in a sous vide, that line is actually like really tiny. You know, it's just the surface that's seared, and then it's that same temperature meat, you know, top to bottom. And then not only that, but you also retain more moisture. And so you see a lot of steaks when you cook them on the grill tend to shrink a little bit, but for sous vide, doesn't really do that. Now, it might puck up a little bit, but, you know, so you get more retention, more precision temperatures. Plus, I mean, like you can cook corn and, you know, other stuff. Like we cook corn on the cob in the sous vide, and I'm not lying to you, it is the best corn on the cob I've ever had.
Really?
In my whole life. You know, because like that butter soaks all the way down into it. You know, you put it in a vacuum seal bag with butter, dude.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's fun.
Now, was it you telling me that that fall bear you'd gotten, basically the fat was like pink or purple in it because of the huckleberries?
Yeah.
So let's talk about, and I do want to jump back into different ways you cook your bear meat, maybe where you can find recipes and stuff like that.
Right.
But the bear fat, the uses of the bear fat.
Yeah.
What is so special about that? Because I see like the rivets and different people talking about rendering fat. Why is bear fat such a big deal over everything else?
I think it's a couple different reasons. I mean, for one, it's kind of just a cool thing to do, you know? Like, I mean, it's like, oh, you know, I got bear fat. Like, it sounds cool, but it's a way for you to make even more use of your animal. You know, you don't really take fat off a deer. There's nothing there's rather, there's not a lot that you can do with it, but bear fat is more similar to beef fat where you can cook with it. You can, use it for leather, use it for like reconditioning metals, certain metals, you know. And so it has a lot of these different uses. I mean, we've made chapstick out of it. We've made pie crust with it. We've made like our roux for gumbo with it. I mean, we sear our steaks with it. We cook our eggs in it in the morning exclusively now because you get a lot more of a fluffy, flavorful egg. Searing steaks, it makes for a really good sear, but the smoke point on bear fat is really low. So like if you're searing a steak in bear fat, like have your windows open because your smoke alarms like probably are going to go off.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great flavor, but I don't know why the smoke point is so low. I don't know if that's something that's more indicative of like natural fats versus like olive oil or something like that, where you have to go through like a refined process to get it. Right. I don't know. But
what is the process? How do you render fat?
So I usually cut fat off my bear like in strips, and then I leave a little bit of fat on the meat that I intend to cut up and use for processing. So like I'll leave maybe like a 1/4 inch on like the back straps, for instance. So when I cut it into steaks, it is more similar to beef. And so the rest of the fat that comes off of there, I'll cut it into about like, cubes or pieces, maybe about that size, something like that. And then
like 1.5 inches, 2 inches square.
Yeah, pretty much.
People that are listening.
Yeah. And so, I put it into like usually a pretty thick bottomed pot, just because they tend to heat up a little bit more evenly and more slow because it does burn really easily. And so I put those into a big pot and put the temperature probably about medium, and just let it slowly render, and you'll start to see the pieces of fat get smaller, but liquid start to build up.
Right, it's like melting butter.
Yeah, it's like melting butter, exactly. And then you basically do that until you don't really see much more coming, and it's kind of tricky because if you don't catch it and stop it fast enough, it will burn really quick, and your fat will come out gray. Like whenever you put it into the fridge, it goes from like that nice golden yellow to a solid white, but if you've burned it, it will come out with a slight gray tint to it. And I personally can taste it. Now I've given it to folks and they've cooked with it and said that they can't tell a difference.
So you give away all your burned fat.
Yeah, pretty much. Keep the good stuff for myself,
Yeah.
I share the good stuff too, man. I have so much bear fat at my house. Like, I mean, I just found another 15-pound bag in my freezer that I forgot about that needs to get rendered.
I'll have to get just a little jar of it from you and have my wife try it.
I'll give you as much as you want, man. Seriously. Like I told one of our new employees, Jess, downstairs, she likes to bake a lot. And I was like, dude, you can have some. Like, that'd be totally cool,
That's cool.
Because it's good for bacon. It's good for, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
Cooking wise, really, but it does have more purposes than that too. And someone that kind of really popularized is that what I'm saying?
Popularized,
Yeah. Someone that made bear fat a lot more popular in more recent years was Clay Newcomb. And I mean, he's got a whole podcast named after it, the Bear Grease podcast. You know what I mean? And so it's like, I think that in general, people's want to connect with their past has made so many people curious about it. The same way that we make knives to be passed down to other people because that's what it used to be like in the old times, or even still today. I
mean, it's a form of like frontierism, right? Where you're, gardening, where your food comes from, you're growing your own vegetables.
Right.
There's a few things that are lost arts, things like that, things like sewing, making your own clothes and, stuff like that. But, it's another form. It's taken it a little bit further of like knowing where your food comes from and then being able to use your animal for multiple purposes. I mean, obviously nobody did it better than the Native Americans, right?
Yeah.
And they were using the entire animal. I actually just finished the book Undaunted Courage about the Lewis and Clark expedition.
Yeah.
And, quite frankly, even back then, white people were so much more in tune with being able to get out of what they could of whether it was an animal or clothing or anything else, steel.
Right.
Because the necessity they had to, right?
Yeah.
And obviously the Native Americans back then had to an even greater degree. It was really interesting, again, getting off topic, but Lewis and Clark, got to places where they had to make a canoe, and they were using elk skins to make canoes.
Yeah.
And then stitching those together, and they actually learned at one point they had stitched it together wrong, and it was leaking water through the holes in the stitching.
Yeah.
But then, using different fats and different greases and stuff like that to waterproof, boats and boots they were wearing and clothing. So, and taking that even farther, instead of just using the bear fat, tanning the hides, making coats and gloves. And so this is really just kind of coming back to things that were frankly common knowledge 150 years ago.
Right.
200 years ago was not just common knowledge, but it was survival.
Right.
And so we talk about people being capable. Like, are you going to need to survive off of bear fat someday? Gosh, I hope not.
Yeah, I hope not.
But it's definitely, it's stuff that I don't know. It's stuff that I don't do, but I do find interesting.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
But talk about that bear fat and the huckleberries.
Yeah, so, and I don't know if this is the reason why for sure, but
yeah, but we're gonna say it is.
Yeah, exactly, right? Because we're experts. So
yeah. Well, we have a podcast. We're self-appointed experts.
Exactly. Yeah. See.
Yeah.
And so, rumor has it that fall bears, their fat is tinted like this. Well, it is tinted like this pinkish color, right? And, rumor has it is because they've been eating berries for gorging themselves on berries for months. I mean, they can put on, 100+ pounds before they hibernate, which is, think about how much it would take us to put on 100 pounds in like a few months.
I feel like that's my calling. Like just apple pie, peach pie. Like I'm meant to do that.
Same, and then sleep all winter.
Yeah. I mean, that bear the first bear that my son Hank shot, just had an ungodly amount of fat on that.
That was a big bear.
And it was so, 3 inches was minimum. That thing had a fat on it. It was unbelievable. That bear that Hank shot last year, 0 fat.
Yeah.
And both fall bears.
Yeah.
But that bear, she was an old sow, teeth worn down, and there was no way that bear was making it through winter.
Right.
Like she had 0 fat in September.
Yeah. I shot a bear. It was a sow actually last year in October. And it was, to this day, it's still the latest that I've shot a bear. All the huckleberries are burned out, and so once the huckleberries burn out, they're switching back over to like grubs, flipping rocks, gut piles from people's elk or whatever they can find. And I shot this sow, and two things that I noticed from the jump, usually this might gross some people out, but usually I will cut open a bear's stomach to see what they've been eating, just so I can know, right? And so this sow had been eating grubs and stumps. She had a little bit of wood chunks in her belly with some grubs, stuff like that.
And the neighbor's poodle.
Yeah. No, this one was like way, way up there, but I found her in an old huckleberry patch, but when I got her home, I noticed that she did not have much fat on her either. Turns out she was 22 years old when I got the tooth age back. I actually found out the day that I left here and did the podcast with you.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I happened to check my phone. I was like, holy smokes. But it's the same thing. I think that just like us, the older they get, they kind of move out of their prime. And I've shot 11 and 12-year-old bears in August that have had like 6 or 7 inches of fat on them, and that's pretty early in the season, all things considered. And then, shoot this sow in October that's got like 2.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so it's
yeah, and so much of that fluctuates with rainfall during the year. Just much like your garden grows, the vegetation in the mountains grows.
right,
Similar. Like it needs the hot weather at the right time. It needs
right,
water at the right time.
right.
And quite frankly, how much those bears have to travel for food makes a big difference.
Exactly.
And it can be a bit bear dependent too on just how lucky does a particular bear get on opportunistic finding of something dead.
Right. Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah, I agree.
Is it true that you used to be a blonde Irishman? You were just white as can be, and you ate so much bear that your skin got darker over time. Is that
You've
true?
been talking to Isaac Ailman. Is that... the answer is yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I shot my first bear in 2020, but I just like I got so obsessed with it and like so fascinated by it so quickly. I mean, since then, I've shot 7, and it's 2023. You know, and so. But
I was gonna say, there's nobody I know that talks more about. I mean, you're on the board of what, the American Bear Foundation? Or something?
I'm a lifetime member.
Or lifetime member. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you should be on the board.
Right.
What are you guys doing? Put Brett on the board.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so much of what you do and think and talk about. I mean, most people are hunting elk all fall.
Right.
Brett's hunting bears.
Right.
You get your bear, and now you're making your wife hunt bear.
Yeah, I know. Poor thing. Gosh, especially hunting them this late into the year. But
yeah,
like we eat so much of it, and that's part of the reason why I became so obsessed with it. Whenever I moved out west, I told myself, "There's one thing I'm going to learn how to hunt. It's going to be bears." Because I was just like fascinated by them. So I did learn how to hunt them, and then the more that I've cooked with them, and like the more that I've learned about processing my own food in particular, like the more useful I've found, or rather I should say the more diverse I've found that bear really can be. Like it works really great for pork recipes. So it also works really great for beef recipes too. And so like, I mean,
what are some of your favorite things you do with it?
Yeah, so just in the past month or so, I've smoked bear ribs and like a whole bear butt, which on pork is the shoulder. Have smoked them both, and both of them turned out really good. The only difference is that their muscle grains are kind of thick. I mean, you can see it when you cut the meat. It's like their muscle grains just kind of have like this more robust look to them, and you got to think like they're all climbing all over mountains and stuff like that.
Yeah, they're a lot tougher than your average hog.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And so, like a sous vide helps with that, because the longer a piece of meat is in a sous vide, then the more it tenderizes it. And so whenever you're like smoking bear, I will leave it in the smoker as long as I have pork, and it still comes out a little bit tougher,
So low and slow as long as you can.
Low and slow as long as you can. I mean, we do roast. I'm a big fan of neck roast. It has a lot of like connective tissue and collagen and stuff like that. So it's not only good for you, but it just adds a lot to the flavor. Ground meat, like I'll take bear fat and then use my percentages the same way that people add pork to their ground deer. I'll add bear fat to our ground deer and our ground bear, and I tend to add more to the bear, even though it's leaner than beef or pork in general. I still tend to add more to the bear just because it really brings that flavor out. And then like if I had bear fat to deer, I'd keep it still pretty lean, but, so like it's the more you cook with it, the more you realize that you can literally just substitute it for venison or beef or pork. I mean, like we make pasta like spaghetti, basically just use bear meat.
Yeah, we've done that. So good for sure. And I will say definitely with us doing all of our bear into sausage, a lot of that is just out of ignorance and kind of laziness of not experimenting and taking the time to learn and whatnot. But I will say about the sausage, like we raise a couple hogs every year, and my daughter has a 4-H pig, so we always butcher one hog and we keep it. And the biggest problem with like bacon and sausage is with 4 kids. One hog doesn't produce enough of that to keep us throughout an entire year. Right. I mean, we do eat, we have chickens and stuff. We eat a lot of breakfast. So we cook a lot of sausage, and then my wife obviously uses that in other recipes and stuff. So like the sausage goes away really fast. The nice thing about putting like an entire bear into that sausage is someone like yourself might think, well, geez, I wouldn't make that backstrap, or I'd do whatever. But at the very least, we're definitely not wasting it.
Yeah, exactly.
And it gives us enough supplement and, quite honestly, kind of something else to mix besides just having pork sausage.
Right.
We can kind of mix it up. But I'll be honest with you, as far as mixing that up and like having something that tastes different than the other thing, you cannot, like, people cannot tell. I could mix all of our pork and our bear sausage up and feed breakfast to people every day, and you would not be able to tell the difference.
Yeah, you really
and
can.
we have so many people that come from out of town, stay with us. We cook sausage. I never tell them it's bear. I just cook it. And then breakfast is about done. I'm like, what'd you think of that sausage? And like, oh, good. Is that one of your pigs? It's like, no, that was Hank's bear. And they can't believe it.
Right.
So, and sausage is another one of those things that if it's pork sausage, like nobody eats their pork sausage rare. It's easy to cook sausage to a plenty done condition, where you're well beyond any worry of trichinella, and so I encourage people at the very, very least, make your whole bear into sausage at a minimum.
Seriously,
and then maybe pull the back straps out and start experiencing with that. And then go from there.
Right. It's if like I process all my own meat. And so, just kind of nerding out on that stuff has what's led me to do, a lot of the things that I've tried. But truth be told, man, like this year, I'm probably going to skip on some of the things that I've tried and just grind it up for sausage or burger or whatever, just because we have found that, for one, we eat a ton of it. I mean, it's like I don't plan on smoking bear shanks or butts every Sunday,
right?
For months in a row, you know what I mean? And so it's like, but we do eat a lot of pasta,
right?
Or steak or something like that. I mean, so I'll take the hindquarters, especially, separate the muscle groups and then cut steaks out of that. So you get like sirloin, you get bottom round, you get eye round and stuff like that. The front shoulders have really just been putting for grind. And even the bear that I just shot a few weeks ago, or it might be a month ago now, took, I think, 3 of those shanks and, 2 of the shanks and put them in the grind pile because we had shanks from last year still, you know what I mean? And then saved 2 of those shanks to experiment with. Always keep the neck roast. In my opinion, neck roast is the best roast. And for bears, if the bear is not giant, or if you have a really big crock pot, dude, if you keep that neck bone in there, it is otherworldly.
Really?
Yeah, it really is. I mean, or if the neck bone is too big, makes the roast too big to keep it in the crock pot, I take it out, and then, I'm from the South, and so we use like pork neck bones and stuff for collard greens, so I'll just like throw a neck bone and collard greens.
Yeah.
But that's the whole point, though, is that it's no different than beef or pork, except that it's wild. And there's wild pigs. I mean, so it's really not that different. There's free range cattle.
Henry, what's Google the symptoms and the cures of trichinella, and read it to us, because I want to hear. Yeah. We say like, oh, you're gonna get trichinella. Like, well, what is that?
Right.
I mean, and is it gonna kill us?
What's
going on here?
Right.
Oh, here, he's gonna pull it up here.
I'll tell you one thing. I hope I don't get it.
Main symptoms are right there.
Where at?
There you go.
Symptoms
right
of
above that
trichinosis, trichinosis, headaches, fevers, chills, coughs, swelling of the face, eyes, achy joints, muscle pains, itchy, diarrhea, constipation. All the first symptoms. So, so you're kind of sick. And then Google like cures. Oh, right here. They discover you have roundworms, trichinella parasites early, albendazole or some shit. Can kill the worms and larvae in the small intestine. The drugs may cause nausea, vomiting. Well, all drugs cause that. They might, cause your eyeballs to bleed, your butt to bleed. I guess what I'm looking at is like, is it easily curable?
I think that I want to say that, like, if I'm not mistaken, the length of treatment is fairly long.
If treatment is not initiated within the first several days of infection, more prolonged repeated courses of treatment might be necessary. So to your point, it might drag on a little bit.
Yeah.
Go down to, is trichinosis curable in humans down there? Right down there, a little bit lower. Curable. Treated with anti-parasitic drugs. Can be fatal in severe cases if not treated. Well, obviously. So basically, I'm not saying you want to go get it and you should be eating bear meat rare, but like, it's not going to just instantly kill you. You're going to get sick. You're going to feel like shit.
Yeah.
It sounds like basically pretty much all the symptoms sound like food poisoning.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
And if you know you're eating bear, then maybe you should go get checked out, sooner than if you ate at a shitty restaurant in the city.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you got to think some of those symptoms are no different than getting bit by certain ticks down in Texas that make you, like the Lone Star tick that makes you like allergic to red meat. Those are a lot of the same symptoms. Yeah,
and I mean, man, I'd be way more scared of ticks that are on the bears than the actual trichinosis in the bear, because Evan Hafer, a bunch of these different people have gotten Lyme disease from ticks. I actually don't think Lyme disease. Look on there and see if ticks. Is there Lyme disease in Montana ticks? I think that's more of a south.
Yeah,
southern
I
thing.
think so. Like eastern and south.
I don't think you can get Lyme disease up here. About 25 cases of tick-borne illness recorded in Montana each year. Lyme disease is most common. Oh, you can. 11 cases in the state each year.
So out of those 25, Lyme disease only accounts for 11.
Yeah, in Montana.
Yeah.
That's pretty low.
Read the bottom line there.
Where the ticks in Montana do not carry Lyme disease. So they're probably getting Lyme disease somewhere else.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I didn't think we could get it in Montana.
Well, that's good to know.
Yeah, I think you get Rocky Mountain spotted fever. The Rocky Mountain wood tick is very common. Yeah, I think that's what you can get is some Rocky Mountain spotted fever from ticks in Montana.
Yeah.
I ain't scared no fever. All right, well, I appreciate you jumping on here. I know it's kind of just a short, quick one all about bears and bear meat. Is there something else, anything else we didn't cover? Or?
No, not that I can think of. I just...
Maybe websites. Do you have anything any places you go yourself? I guess the Bear Grease podcast.
That's a good one. Clay Newcomb,
he's with Meat Eater and those guys.
Yep, invaluable source for bear information. The American Bear Foundation is another one.
Mm-hmm. We're going to be putting some recipes and doing some articles and stuff on bears and bear meat and stuff too. Yeah,
that's the other thing I was going to say is like here soon, like we should have some more stuff doing that.
Yep.
I hate to plug myself, but if you look at my social media, you can see some of the food stuff that I've done with bears particularly.
Yeah, what's your Instagram?
It's at Brett Benton _.
Okay.
So BrettBenton.
Yeah, check out Brett's Instagram. Follow him if you're a bear nut. The point of this podcast is for new people that are thinking about bear hunting, or you'd like to go bear hunt, but you feel bad because like you don't want to kill a bear and waste it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, please don't do that.
Yeah,
take that bear, treat it like any other animal.
Right.
take care of the meat like you would any other animal.
Right.
One of the really big things with like bears, once you harvest it, is you got to get that hair and that hide off. Those things will store heat inside of them, unlike any other animal with all that fat.
Exactly.
Rip that hide off. Even the hide itself, open that thing up and let that thing air out, because you'll skin the hide out and roll it up meat to meat and roll it up in a ball, and that hide will store its own heat without the meat in it.
Yeah, I actually made that mistake on one of my bears, and I think it was one of my bears last year. It was, granted, it was a really hot day when I shot this bear, and I shot him late morning, so he might have had some hair slippage anyway, just for the time it took to get him out. But same thing, rolled up the hide, put it in the freezer, and then it still takes hours.
Even in the freezer, the guide I went with in Canada said that we laid our hides out spread open in the freezer, because even balled up and in the freezer, that thing will sit there for literally days and not that's what that bear fur and that hide is designed to do, is to keep the cold out.
Exactly.
So your hide can literally spoil in the freezer.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing with any kind of meat, is getting that thing opened up, especially like an archery season, getting the bones out of it.
Right.
Like that neck meat you talked about. Like, only leave that neck bone in there if you think you're properly getting that thing cooled. Otherwise, open that thing up, or open it up and leave the neck bone in, but just slice that meat open and just let it get some air to it.
Right. Take the trachea out, as soon as you can. That's just one of the things that can help that too.
Yeah.
There's definitely got to get them cooled off, man, especially because a lot of bear seasons, they're really active in the fall, where those temperatures outside are still 90 degrees in some places. No, a week ago here it was 75, 80 degrees, and today it's white and snowing. But all right, man, I appreciate you jumping on. Thanks, Josh.
All right, we'll see you.